Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. This happened about 2 years ago. Me and my girlfriend used to live in an apartment complex, and we had this neighbor that was extremely nice, like uncomfortably nice. We were always nice back. Me and my girlfriend are in our 20s, and this was a man, probably in his 50s, so sometimes we wouldn't really understand the jokes that he was making, but everything was chill. Well, one night at around maybe 10 p.m., me and my girlfriend were leaving the apartment complex to go to Walmart, and we walked by his store talking at a normal volume. By the time that we got to our car, he busted out of his store and started yelling. I couldn't understand what he was saying, so I assumed that he was either on the phone or yelling at someone he lives with. Well, the next day after I get off work and I come home, he is standing outside in the parking lot and he is staring at me and talking, but I can't hear him because the window is up, so I stay in the car until he leaves. Yes, I know I was a wuss. I then go up to my apartment and everything is okay. Well, me and my girlfriend walk out the apartment to do our laundry like 15 minutes later, and he is sitting in his car waiting for us, and then he says, "Don't ever try to yell at me through my door again. If you want to have a conversation, you can knock." We tell him that we weren't talking to him and that we were just talking to each other and walking by his store at the same time. He said he doesn't believe us and still says that we were trying to talk to him through the door. He lived in the complex for another year, and every time that we walked past him, he would either glare, mumble under his breath, and sometimes laugh at us. And this may just be paranoia, but one day we went to 3 different thrift stores in town, and every time that we walked out to go to our car, he was in the parking lot sitting in his car and on the phone. So, I don't know if he was following us. I'm getting the vibe that he may have some sort of mental disorder. Maybe drugs? I don't know. I think about this guy a lot, and it always bewilders me. Right after graduating high school, I dipped from my mom's place. I couldn't stand the guy she dated or had around, and she didn't seem to care how much I felt, so I was done. I had saved up most of my money while I was working in school, and I got myself a cheap car, so I didn't have to rely on her. Then the weekend after I graduated, I got as much of my stuff in my car that I could, and then I left. I still talked to my mom, so I knew the rest of my stuff would be okay there, but I just needed out. For the first few years, I lived with friends or cousins, and I just kept most of my stuff in my car. A few months before my 20th birthday, I had a friend offer to get an actual place together, so it would be in both of our names. I agreed, and soon after, we got a nice little duplex that was perfect for us. It was a 2-bedroom with a full basement. We ended up turning the basement into a party and gaming room. He had an Xbox set up down there, his computer, and even a stereo system. We ended up finding a foosball table that we brought home and put down there and made some makeshift ping pong table. It was a nice little place to hang out and I loved it. We got to know the neighbors too. A few of them were younger couples around us with kids. There was a guy that lived with his on and off again girlfriend across the street that had come over a few times that we got to know. And then, there was the guy in the duplex attached to us. It was one guy, probably in his late 30s. He usually kept to himself, Like he may nod or smile at us if we were outside, but that's about it. However, he did have his share of guests. Most of them showed up with hats and sunglasses on and never acknowledged anyone. They always immediately went inside. There were other times where it would be really late at night and we would see a car's headlights pull in and sit there till our neighbor ran out to the car, exchange something, and then run back in. We could piece things together after a few of his visitors, but nothing ever happened over there, and he never bothered us. It just became more of a minding our own business and never thought much else about it. A little over a year later, we renewed our lease and we were getting ready to have a party for my 21st birthday. I remember us going to get snacks and drinks. My friend was 22, so he bought the drinks, of course, and just having one hell of a party. We probably had a dozen people over. We had some downstairs, out back, in the living room, and it was a great time. I know that I drank a lot, but I was home, so once I was done, I just passed out in my room. Later that night, I started to hear a lot of thumping that sounded like it was coming from the next room. The wall my bed is against is the joined wall of our neighbors, so we can hear a lot when you're in the bedrooms and sometimes the living room. I was pretty out of it, of course, but I remember waking up to use the restroom. And when I came back, that's when I started hearing all the sounds. First, it was just single thumps like someone slamming a door or maybe even dropping something. I then started hearing grunts and muffled yelling. I didn't really think much of it and couldn't really process between being tired and drunk, so I just passed back out. The next morning though, I woke up to more pounding, but this time, it sounded like it was coming from our door. So I got up, groggy as hell, and I made my way to the front door. I thought maybe it was one of our friends coming back to get something that they left. Maybe, but unfortunately not. I opened the door to see two cops standing there. They introduced themselves and vaguely explained at first that there was an ongoing investigation and said that they had some questions. I offered to let them in, but they stayed near the entry. They asked me if I was home last night, and when I told them that I was, as well as several others for a party, they asked if anyone else was in the house. I assumed my roommate was, and they told me to get him and anyone else inside. I quickly went, knocked on my roommate's door to get him up, asked if he knew if anyone else stayed over, and he mentioned someone being downstairs. So I went down there too, and I woke up our friend and her boyfriend and then got them upstairs with us. The cops then had us all go outside and asked to search the place. With our guests back at their car, my roommate and I asked what was going on. They said that they got a call for a welfare check on the man next to us and said that they had found him dead. They said that it appeared that he had been robbed, so they wanted to check with us to see if we heard or saw anything and make sure that we could account for all of our guests. I certainly knew everyone that came over and didn't suspect any of them being the killer. The cop then said that they were more concerned if anyone was here that showed up unexpectedly or was acting quite suspiciously. I again said that I couldn't recall anyone like that, and we gave them permission to look over the place to make sure that no one was hiding in there. That was terrifying enough, the thought that we could have been hiding a killer. I went ahead and let my friends that were there know that they could leave. With the permission of the other cop, of course. I just didn't feel like telling them what had happened, and they seemed like they just didn't want to be around the cops, so they also left pretty quickly too. As I walked back to the door, I noticed the window of our neighbor's place had been broken and the screen door was nearly ripped off the hinges. And after their search, they told us that it looked like someone had nearly pulled off the back door handle, so they dusted for prints. They said that they most likely saw all of the people and then took off instead of targeting us, especially if the suspect was alone. They had a few more questions for us before finally leaving us to comprehend what all just happened. We were in a bit of a shock, and it was quite sobering, unfortunately. I think it was the following day that we had a news van drive by, taking pictures and recording, which was weird till we saw it on the news that night. They were talking about our neighbor. They said that he had been strangled and then found by police after his sister tried calling multiple times and not getting an answer. My friend thinks that since he was a seller or user, that he was targeted and probably robbed for whatever he may have had. The fact that they tried us did worry me a bit. Was their plan to make sure that we didn't talk or see anything? Was it just a robbery gone bad? Did he think that he would hang out at our party and then blend in? It was a bit worrisome at night, wondering if they would come back till the news reported that they had arrested someone in relation to this case, so that definitely made me feel better. I think the place sat empty for several months before we got a new neighbor. It was an older couple, which put a damper on our parties, but at least we knew that they probably wouldn't have any shady guest around. So I guess that the wildest thing that I've ever experienced happened last year, and I still don't know how to explain it without sounding like I'm making it up, but here goes. It started with these little things going missing. I live alone in a pretty quiet neighborhood, so I figured that I was just forgetful. A protein bar here, a sock there, whatever. But then, my TV would be on a different input than I left it. Nothing huge, just enough to make me second guess myself. The weirdest part? I would hear these faint bumps in the ceiling sometimes. I chalked it up to raccoons or whatever. My house is old, stuff creaks. But then one night, I came home late from work and I could swear that I saw a shadow move past the vent opening in the hallway ceiling. I told myself that I was tired, imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling, so I set up one of those cheap motion sensor cameras that I bought off Amazon, and I pointed it straight to the attic access panel in the hallway. 2 nights later, I got a notification at 2:17 a.m. Motion detected. I opened the clip and my stomach dropped. There was a person climbing down from the attic, like full on quietly stepping down the ladder, looking around and heading into my kitchen, and I froze. I was in the house at the time that clip was taken. I called the cops immediately, and I locked myself in my room with a bat, freaking out while they did a full sweep of the house. And they found no one at first. But when they checked the attic, there was a little setup there. A sleeping bag, some snacks, a small camping stove, empty water bottles. Someone had clearly been living up there. The person was my neighbor's grown son, who apparently had some drug issues and got kicked out a while back. He broke in when I was on vacation a few months earlier and just never left. And he would sneak down at night to grab food or watch TV. He got arrested and I moved out 3 weeks later. I still have trouble sleeping in total silence because now every creak makes me think that someone's crawling around above me. Even though this was almost 10 years ago now, I have never been able to get this out of my head, so I thought that I would post it here. I was about 11 or 12 years old, living in an apartment with my mom. Right across from our apartment was a very creepy neighbor. I could write a whole book about all the creepy, wild, and downright insane things that he said and did throughout the 2 years that he was our neighbor. But this was something that stuck with me more than anything else. My mom and this neighbor were having a casual conversation with each other, with my mom's goal being to try and find some common ground with him, to try and clear up any misunderstandings or miscommunications that may have led him to dislike us so much, as he had a pretty blatant feeling of disdain towards us. But evidently, something went wrong during this conversation, as my mom suddenly came stomping into our apartment, loudly shutting and locking the door. She was visibly upset and shaken, so I asked her what was wrong. Her voice trembling, she said that our neighbor said this completely unprompted. "You know, if I were you, I'd keep your daughter away from guys like me." Now, while I will never know exactly what he meant by this, my mind definitely had plenty of ideas of what the fuck he meant by this, and at the very least, it felt like a thinly veiled threat. And the worst part was that I was often home alone, as I did online school while my mom went to work. So from then on, I never felt safe when I was home alone, as my imagination ran wild on what he might end up doing to me. Now, I never thought that I would say this kind of thing, and I feel a little guilty about it. But thankfully, he ended up dying before he even did follow through on his creepy-ass comment. Also, before anyone asked, my mom only told me about this because she wanted to warn me to stay the fuck away from him and to never do anything like keep the door unlocked. Well, she didn't have to tell me twice. This happened a few years ago when a friend and I shared a duplex. These were owned by individual people instead of a company, so there were less people around and less staff to monitor us, and we were pretty much left to ourselves. There were a few other surrounding duplexes to our sides and real nice looking houses across from us. Some of the duplexes looked okay like ours, and some of the others weren't as nice and taken care of. And the same went with some of the tenants. Some of them were good people, some kept to themselves, and some you tried to avoid eye contact with. Thankfully, our neighbor of the attached duplex was one of the good ones. Well, at least half of them. It was an older woman, Ruby, that lived there. When we first moved in, she seemed very spry and outdoorsy too. That's part of the reason why Jess got so involved in gardening. She was always outside planting, watering and weeding her garden bed, cleaning her patio furniture and many more. She'd make too many sweets or snacks and always bring us extras, things like that. We didn't mind it at all. Otherwise, she kept to herself and we kept to ours. There was no snooping around, asking questions, and getting in each other's business either, so she was pretty much the perfect neighbor. However, Ruby had a son, Marco, that was less than welcoming, and we didn't care to see him around. He would randomly show up, and when she wasn't home, he could just be standing outside for hours until she showed up. The first time we saw him, he was sitting on her steps in a hoodie and jeans falling asleep. We did have a security camera set up, so after about an hour of him just sitting there, I almost went to ask him who he was waiting for when I noticed Ruby pull in. I watched through the window just to make sure because I didn't want her to be harassed or something worse if this was a stranger. I saw the smile on her face fade to more of a fake grin when she saw him sitting there and they started talking. She then let him in, and from there, I assumed she knew who the person was and I let it go. Marco would randomly show up at times and could be there for a few hours, and then someone would come and pick him up, or it would appear like he would stay there overnight a few times. We were finally introduced one time when we were out front smoking and he asked for a cigarette. Ruby came out shortly after and told us that he was her son and that he was visiting for a while. We were polite, but the guy definitely didn't seem like he was all there. He typically looked exhausted all the time. It started to become a normal thing when he was around, and as soon as we were outside, he was asking us for a smoke, and he was over there maybe once a week. And then for a while, it became less frequent, maybe a few days a month. Then, after not seeing him again for 2 to 3 months, he would show back up again, just sitting on the porch with a backpack and a box. It would turn out that he would move in with Ruby. Great, she didn't look too thrilled about it either. As I started to hear them talk outside on the back patio, she would ask him about his plans, and he would get irritated and say things like he didn't know, he didn't have any, and don't worry about me and stuff like that. One time, late at night, after he bummed another smoke from us, he asked where he could go to get cheap beer without being carded. We told him that we didn't really know and just told him about a local liquor store. He then proceeded to walk off down the street, and as we finished our cigarette, Ruby came out and apologized for her son. She said that he had been down on his luck and he was trying to get him back on his feet, and she appreciated us being patient with him around. She tried to offer us money for the cigarettes that he kept taking, but of course, we always refused. Sadly, they would begin arguing more. You could hear them fighting outside, then you could hear them fighting inside. You could hear the door slamming as he left, and him banging on the door to be let back in when he forgot his key. Ruby had already started to shut herself in more. We hardly saw her go outside anymore. And I'd notice on the camera that she would go out real early in the morning in her robe just to water her plants, and then quickly go back in. I think she had like a book club or a Bible club every Wednesday night, and a few other ladies would be over at her place, and that stopped too. I felt bad, but there wasn't really anything that we could do but just hope that he would leave soon. That would soon come to fruition when he gets kicked out. They were arguing again, and after someone else equally shady showed up at her place, Marco went outside and brazenly, with a camera right on them, made a drug deal. I now understood why Ruby had been so upset. I can't imagine that it was for her or that she used at all. I shamefully went out back to listen to the fight when I heard it, and she mentioned that he was there for a new start, to kick it and get his own place. She complained that he was using again and that he hadn't found a job or even had proof that he was looking. She said that she didn't want that stuff around her, in her place, and didn't want his friends to know where she lived, so she told him to leave. I know we, for one, were thankful. He slammed the front door and then started walking down the street again. I kept checking the cameras a few times to see if he would ever return, but he never did and wouldn't the next night either. However, it wouldn't be a simple move out by any means. I am a heavy sleeper, so a few hours into my slumber, I am awoken to Jess banging on my door. As I went to open it, I noticed the smell of smoke. That was the reason for her waking me up too. We started looking around, making sure that nothing was on fire and trying to find out where the smoke was coming from. When we started hearing smoke alarms going off from Ruby's side. We quickly grabbed our phones and then ran outside. Jess started calling 911, and I just remember frantically beating on her door to try and wake her up, but she never answered. This is where I regret never swapping phone numbers with her. When the fire truck showed up, we told them that we thought that Ruby was still inside, and then we went to the end of our driveway to wait to see what happened. Unfortunately, Ruby was still inside, but they were able to get her out, barely alive. Not only was she in there, but she didn't answer because she had been beaten on the back of her head, causing her to pass out on the living room floor. Of course, the fire was intentionally set as well, and we had a feeling that we knew by who. Thankfully, we didn't have to point the finger, as we learned Ruby identified Marco as the one that did it. Jess ended up helping her out a lot when she was at the hospital, and then told her what had happened. She locked Marco out, so he ended up breaking in through the back door. They had gotten into a fight when he hit her in the back of the head, and the next thing she knew, she was at the hospital. But don't worry, she talked to him when he got arrested, and he admitted that he was high when this took place, but thought that only his mom's side would burn down and was sorry for hurting us. Charmer, right? She had damage in the living room, and they had to repair the wall separating our units, so we both got put into a hotel for a while. Jess still keeps in touch with Ruby and tells me how she's doing, but I don't care about attached units anymore. I moved into my own place as soon as I could. And here's the riddle for this video. Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared because your fear feeds me.